In 1628, one Dutch admiral pulled off one of the greatest heists in naval history, a plan so bold it was thought to be impossible. He didn't just steal a fortune, he helped bring an empire to its knees. This is the story of Piet Hein, who, with his fleet, captured the legendary Spanish Silver Fleet. But how did one man manage to outsmart the most powerful navy in the world and, in doing so, change the course of history? The year is 1628, and empires are at war. For 60 long, bloody years, the small Dutch Republic has been fighting for its very existence against the global superpower of the age, Spain. This conflict, the 80 Years' War, wasn't just fought on land. It had spilled over into the vast Atlantic Ocean. Spain was a titan, one of the world's first global empires, with territories stretching from the Americas to the Philippines. This colossal enterprise was built on conquest and fueled by a literal river of silver. For generations, enormous treasure fleets, convoys of galleons and merchant ships, sailed from the New World to Spain, their hulls groaning with the wealth of entire continents. From the mines of Peru and Mexico came silver and gold. From plantations came sugar, tobacco, and exotic dyes. This annual cash injection was the lifeblood of the Spanish war machine, paying for the armies that were fighting the Dutch. These fleets were legendary. For generations, they had sailed largely untouched, protected by heavily armed galleons and disciplined convoys. Attacking one was seen as madness. Capturing one was considered impossible. But the Dutch were a people defined by defiance. They were merchants and sailors, and they had a new weapon in this global economic war: the Dutch West India Company, or WIC. Founded in 1621, the WIC's official purpose was trade, but its real business was war. It had a license from the government to attack Spanish commerce wherever it was most vulnerable. The company's directors had a grand plan, the Groot Desseyn, and part of that plan was to do the impossible: intercept and capture an entire Spanish treasure fleet. In 1628, the WIC gathered a fleet of over 30 ships, manned by thousands of sailors and soldiers, for this one single purpose. All they needed was a commander with the skill, the nerve, and the deep-seated grudge to pull it off. They found him in a 51-year-old vice admiral who knew the Spanish better than almost anyone: Piet Hein. Piet Hein wasn't born an aristocrat. He was a product of the sea. Born in Delfshaven on November 25, 1577, he was the son of a sea captain and took to the waves as a teenager. His early life was a harsh lesson in the realities of the 17th century maritime world. Around the age of 20, his ship was captured by the Spanish. For the next 4 years, Piet Hein was a galley slave, chained to an oar in a Spanish warship. It was a horrific existence, but it was also an accidental education. He learned the Spanish language fluently, their naval procedures, their tactics, and their mindset from the inside out. He saw their strengths, but more importantly, he saw their weaknesses. He was eventually freed in a prisoner exchange in 1602, but his ordeal wasn't over. Just a year later, he was captured again near Cuba and imprisoned for another 4 years. His time in chains and in prison left him with a burning resentment for the empire that had enslaved him. Hein returned to the sea, first as a merchant skipper and later joining the Dutch East India Company. But it was the new Dutch West India Company that gave him the platform for his true calling. He joined as a vice admiral in 1623 and quickly made a name for himself. In 1624, he helped lead a daring assault that captured the Portuguese settlement of Salvador in Brazil, which the Dutch held for about a year. In 1627, he raided the Brazilian coast again, capturing over 20 ships loaded with precious sugar. Hein was a calculated risk-taker, a brilliant strategist, and a man with a personal score to settle. The WIC didn't just see an admiral, they saw the perfect instrument for their grand design. His years in Spanish captivity hadn't broken him. They had forged him into the ultimate weapon to use against the Spanish Empire. Now, at the helm of a powerful fleet, he set his sights on the one prize that had eluded everyone: the Spanish Silver Fleet. The Spanish Treasure Fleet, or Flota de Indias, was the most critical logistical operation of its time. Typically, Two major convoys sailed each year from Spain. The flota went to Veracruz in Mexico, while the galleons headed for Cartagena and Panama, carrying European goods to the colonies. But their real purpose was the return journey. In the Americas, their holds were filled with unimaginable riches. The Veracruz fleet loaded silver from Mexican mines and valuable red cochineal dye. The Cartagena fleet loaded gold and the vast silver output from the legendary mines of Potosí in modern-day Bolivia. This silver was carried by mule across the Isthmus of Panama before being loaded onto the ships. These fleets were floating fortresses. The merchant ships, called naos, were protected by powerful warships, galleons, armed with dozens of heavy cannons. These convoys could number 50 ships or more, sailing in a tight, intimidating formation. While privateers like Francis Drake had managed to pick off a stray ship here and there, no one had ever come close to capturing an entire fleet. For generations, more treasure ships were lost to hurricanes than to Spain's enemies. They were a symbol of Spain's unshakable grip on the New World. In the summer of 1628, the New Spain fleet from Mexico was getting ready for its annual journey. Due to the Dutch threat, it would be sailing alone. Its sister fleet from Cartagena stayed in port. The 16 or so ships of the New Spain fleet had their holds waiting to be filled with a staggering amount of wealth. For Piet Hein and the Dutch West India Company, this wasn't just a target. It was the ultimate prize. Piet Hein arrived in the Caribbean with his formidable fleet. His orders were simple: find and capture the Silver Fleet. But the Spanish weren't fools. News of a large Dutch naval presence traveled fast, and the Spanish commanders in the fortified ports of Cartagena and Veracruz did the sensible thing. They stayed put. The treasure fleets refused to sail into an ambush. A stalemate began. A lesser commander might have gotten impatient and tried a foolish assault on a fortified harbor. But Hein's greatest weapon wasn't his cannons, it was his mind. He understood his enemy. The Empire ran on a schedule, that this treasure was desperately needed in Europe, and that the Spanish were overconfident in the fleet's invincibility. So he decided to lay a trap, not of elaborate deception, but of patience. For weeks, Hein patrolled the crucial sea lanes between the Spanish colonies and their main rendezvous point in Havana, Cuba. He knew the Spanish fleet had to pass through these waters. All he had to do was wait for them to make a move. The trap was set. Believing the immediate threat had passed, the commander of the New Spain fleet, Juan de Benavides, gave the order to sail. He was not a seasoned naval warrior, but an official with limited naval combat experience. He made a series of disastrous mistakes. His ships were dangerously overloaded with cargo and passengers, making them slow, overloaded treasure ships rather than warships ready for a fight. The unsuspecting Spanish fleet, about 16 ships in all, sailed directly into the path of the waiting Dutch armada. On the evening of September 7, 1628, the Spanish fleet saw Dutch sails on the horizon. Panic erupted. Juan de Benavides knew instantly he'd been outmaneuvered and that his overloaded ships stood no chance. Outgunned and outmaneuvered, his only thought was to escape. Havana was too far, so he made a desperate dash for the nearest inlet, a deep, narrow bay on the Cuban coast called Matanzas Bay. As night fell, the Spanish ships scrambled into the bay. In their haste and terror, they made another fatal mistake. The bay was shallower than they realized. One by one, the lumbering ships ran aground on sandbanks and mudflats, becoming hopelessly stuck. They were trapped, immobile, and utterly defenseless. Piet Hein had them. With methodical precision, he blockaded the mouth of the bay, sealing any chance of escape, and waited for dawn. As the sun rose on September 8th, the full scale of the disaster was clear. The mighty Spanish ships were stuck fast. Hein didn't even need his large warships. He sent in smaller, more nimble sloops. As the small Dutch boats swarmed the stranded vessels, firing volleys from their muskets, the Spanish defense crumbled. There was no epic cannon duel. The Spanish crews, seeing how hopeless it was, surrendered with almost no bloodshed. Chaos erupted as sailors, soldiers, and passengers abandoned their fortunes, scrambling overboard and swimming for the shore. They fled into the nearby mountains, leaving the greatest treasure in naval history just sitting in the bay. Piet Hein boarded the Spanish flagship. In a moment of ultimate vindication, he addressed the captured officers. He didn't need a translator. Drawing on the language he'd been forced to learn as a captive, he gave his orders in perfect Spanish, arranging for the crews to be given supplies for their humiliating march to Havana. The heist was complete. It wasn't a battle, it was a masterclass in strategy and patience. When the Dutch sailors boarded the captured ships, the scene was beyond their wildest dreams. It took days just to inventory the staggering amount of wealth. The final tally was astronomical. The main prize was 177,537 pounds of silver, mostly in massive bars and chests of coins. Alongside it was about 135 pounds of gold. But that wasn't all. The holds were also packed with valuable trade goods. They found over 37,000 animal hides, thousands of chests of indigo and cochineal, the most prized blue and red dyes in the world, and chests of sugar and valuable logwood. The cargo also included pearls, spices, and other exotic products. Intriguingly, nestled amongst the loot, they also found cacao, one of the earliest recorded instances of chocolate being transported across the Atlantic. When the accountants of the Dutch West India Company finally calculated the total value, it came to 11,509,524 guilders. It's hard to give an exact modern equivalent, but estimates range from hundreds of millions to over $1 billion. To put it in 17th century terms, the loot was enough to fund the entire Dutch army for 8 months. Piet Hein hadn't just captured a fleet, he'd stolen an empire's annual budget. If you're enjoying this story of audacity and fortune, consider subscribing to the channel. Your support helps us bring more of history's greatest tales to life. The capture of the Silver Fleet sent shockwaves across the Atlantic. For Spain, the impact was catastrophic. The loss of nearly 12 million guilders severely crippled the Spanish war chest. King Philip IV government, already on shaky financial ground, was pushed to the brink. It couldn't pay its armies. The entire financial system of the Spanish Empire was thrown into chaos. The king was so furious that the failed commander, Juan de Benavides, was arrested and, after a lengthy trial, executed in 1634. The damage wasn't just financial, it was psychological. The myth of the invincible treasure fleet was shattered, leaving Spain's maritime reputation in tatters. Fear gripped their colonial administration. The next treasure fleet was delayed for nearly a year, afraid of another ambush. For the Dutch Republic, the effect was the polar opposite: national euphoria. The huge injection of cash was a godsend. The now well-funded Dutch army launched a major offensive in 1629, capturing the crucial fortress city of 's-Hertogenbosch, a victory made possible by Spanish silver. Investors in the Dutch West India Company received an incredible cash dividend of 50%. The heist had financed the war for independence and was the Wick's greatest ever victory. The balance of power had decisively shifted. Piet Hein sailed his treasure-laden fleet home, arriving in the Netherlands in early 1629 to a hero's welcome. Crowds cheered, and songs were written in his honor that are still sung today. But as he stood on a town hall balcony watching the adoring masses, Hein famously remarked, "Now they praise me because I gained riches without the least danger. But earlier when I risked my life in full combat, they didn't even know I existed." Despite the immense fortune he'd secured, his personal reward was a modest 7,000 guilders. He had planned to retire, but his country needed him. He was promoted to Lieutenant Admiral of the entire Republic's fleet. His first task was to deal with the Dunkirk privateers, who were harassing Dutch shipping for the Spanish. On June 18, 1629, just months after his historic victory, Piet Hein led his fleet into battle. During the fight, a cannonball struck his left shoulder, and he was killed instantly. The man who faced down the Spanish Empire and won without a fight died in a naval skirmish. He was given a state funeral and buried in the Oude Kerk in Delft, memorialized as one of the nation's greatest heroes. Piet Hein's story is more than just a heist. It was a pivotal moment in history. The capture of the Silver Fleet was a strategic masterstroke that crippled Spain's ability to wage war and directly fueled the Dutch fight for freedom. It proved that the mighty Spanish Empire was vulnerable and that its financial lifeline could be cut. The event helped accelerate the decline of Spanish power and the rise of the Dutch Republic, which would finally win its formal independence in 1648. The legend of Piet Hein remains a powerful symbol of Dutch identity, a story of how a small, determined nation, led by a brilliant and wrong commander, could take on a global superpower and win. It proves that sometimes the course of history is changed not by the largest army, but by the boldest plan. What do you think is the most impressive part of Hein's plan? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this journey, be sure to like and subscribe for more incredible stories from history. Thanks for watching.